All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to day 2 of our mental health summit. For those of you who weren't able to attend last night, it was just an introduction to learning to press pause and taking time for your mental health. And we had a really, really cool activity at the end where we did a little show and tell. And people were able to show items that mean something to them and why. And I think that it was a great experience. And I think that being able to share these kinds of moments with someone who's well-renowned in the space like Neeko is really exciting. So, Neeko, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us tonight. And before I get into the questions, I would like you to introduce yourself in your own way and just share something about your mental health that can be meaningful and can resonate with everyone in the chat.
Sure. Okay. So, hi, my name is Nicole. I go by Neekolul online, and I'm going to turn 28 this year. I do a lot of different variety content. As of late, I've taken a little bit of a backseat on gaming for the backseat on streaming for the reasons actually because of mental health. Um, I I felt like in the last 5 years, this has been like my actual professional job, like a stable professional job for me. I've never actually taken a proper break. So the last year, actually, I've been when you test run a rocket maybe, and maybe probably the first couple of tries it kind of just goes like and then just falls. That's kind of like how it's been a little bit with attempting to take a break. So I feel like the past 6 months I've been actually making a serious effort to take those breaks and not just wait for me to fizzle out, especially as someone that has dealt or does deal with ADHD and a lot of other mental health issues that I really didn't develop until I was an adult. When you are it's funny because I felt like although I was in a very chaotic environment in my brain, I was like, oh, nothing's wrong with me. Like, nah, like, I'm fine. Like, I went through all that stuff and look at me, I'm fine. But when you end up being in like a stable, the more stable your life is, the more things start coming out. And then you're like, whoa, I actually feel like there's maybe stuff that I should, address. So yeah, and then one of those things is just like overdoing myself, thinking that that's gonna make up for something, like make up for, like if I just keep going, I won't need to rest, right? Like because I never had to before. But before I was just kind of like going off of fear, and that is not motivation. So I have to that's something I'm working on right now, is finding that motivation and not confuse that my fear in the past to be confused as motivation. Always like, oh, like I guess the fear probably was that like, oh, what is my life gonna be? What am I gonna make of my life, right?
Yeah.
But that was mostly like I feel like that was more like that and other probably life issues that I had. I was kind of always on fight or flight. So yeah, now I'm trying to work on, now that I'm not in fight or flight, now I'm trying to work on like that motivation actually coming from me rather than of panic. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with my personal mental health journey.
And I think that the key thing to take away from all of this is that you realized you needed that break and you needed to take that time to yourself, and you acknowledged that and you actually did it. Because it's one thing to say, hey, I really could, I could use a break right now. And it's another to actually act on it and not feel guilty about it. So good for you for doing that, because it takes guts, especially when creating content is your livelihood. So you just feel like, all right, if I take a step back, how is that going to affect me as a person? Because that's really, it's what matters more than anything. You being able to sustain yourself and live your life the way that you deserve and the way that you have been. So definitely a tough call to make, but in the long run, it's worth it. But just to give a little bit of extra context for you all, Neeko is a Twitch partner who has also become what I would like to call a cross-pollinating content creator. So she doesn't just create content on Twitch. You'll see her across social platforms creating short-form content like Instagram, TikTok, the whole nine. So I feel like having that perspective is really insightful for some of us who might be more on the side of, I strictly create content on Twitch, but I would like to branch out more. And I think that that's a conversation that will be really cool to have with you today. So just to get into some of the questions that I wrote down here. You had mentioned this earlier when you introduced yourself, and I wrote it here too, that you've been in the public eye for over 5 years now, which half a decade. Just put it in that perspective. That's kind of crazy. How has your perspective of yourself as a creator changed the most between when you started and now?
Of myself, my perspective as a creator, of me, like reflecting upon myself.
Yeah. Like, how has that helped you evolve as a person over the past 5 years? Just seeing how your career has taken you in specific directions, and how has that impacted you as a person?
I think that over the last 5 years, especially being the person that I am and the way that I came about, it definitely makes you have thicker skin. And I think that came with a lot of, I think, well, growing up, I had, as I mentioned before, I have ADHD. So I don't know what other like social things that I have going on. I don't really like. I don't really want to harp on it because I don't want to make it my identity either. Like if I go to the doctor and they're like, "You have also this," and I'm just like, "Okay, well, I don't need. I don't. I just my personal decision. I guess.
Fair.
But I've always had an issue like socially, making friends and stuff like that, and I think that really made me insecure in a way where like I became very much of a people pleaser, because I was looking for acceptance somewhere, and it was really hard making friends. So I think that also did follow me into my adulthood because now instead of it just being high school, it was the world.
Mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
uh, and unfortunately, the content creating space can be a little high school-y. So
Who you telling?
so it was a little, it was very it was learning to really find like a lot of self-confidence and self-acceptance in myself and what I'm doing for my career and for myself. um and yeah, it was, I think it was a lot of like getting confident not only as a public person but also as a in me when I'm with my own thoughts, right? Like to not take things very personally, especially being a public figure. I've gotten very I've I described it to one of my reporter friends because he was doing like a piece of some kind in regards to creators. um I described it as like being in a coliseum and like kind of just getting like your clothes just ripped off essentially. Like it felt very vulnerable because not only do people dissect you and everything you do, but also they dig through everything you've ever done.
That's true.
So so I'm a person and I've had faults in my past as well. No one's perfect. So yeah, it was very hard getting like my life or past mistakes kind of thrown back in my face, especially because uh, the main one, which I'm talking about, was based on a very traumatic experience that I just didn't know how to handle at the time. I was very young, and And it's to have that kind of thrown back in my face and having to explain to hundreds of thousands of people like what the context of that situation was very difficult, very traumatic, and very mentally draining. And it was so being in the public eye and managing all those things together, work and having confidence privately, but also like exerting that confidence outward in your work and as a public figure could get very hard. So I think that's I've definitely I've definitely shifted my perspective that like being confident in yourself is very important because you also can't at the end of the day you can't control other people and what they say and what they say
Mm-hmm.
to you, as much as you can control your comments. People will always find a way to say what they want to say to you. um, so yeah, it was very building that mental fortitude and building that confidence in myself is very important. And I think Nicole from 5 years ago would be pretty proud of how far I've come, I think.
I can only imagine the level of thick skin that you've had to develop over the years. And I know that it doesn't stop. It's not something that you just get over it all of a sudden.
Yeah.
There may be moments that someone mentions a specific thing that you said or event that you experienced in your life, just like you were talking about how you handle trauma differently now versus when you were younger because of who you were then and how you chose to handle things at that time and what you knew. Because at the end of the
Right.
day, like, just like parenthood, we're not born with a handbook on how to handle trauma. We're just not.
Yeah.
We
Everyone
experience
handle it different
things.
too.
Yeah. Things come our way and we deal with them as we see fit at the time. And maybe a year later, we'll look back and be like, damn, I could have done that a little bit differently. But you know what? I did what I could at the time with what I had. I played the cards I was dealt. It is what it is. And who are others to judge you for that, right? Because they weren't in your shoes. They can say all they want about how they would have handled your situation if it were them. No one really knows. Because when you're in a
Right.
situation where trauma is staring you in the face, you just do what you feel like you can at that time. So I hope that you remind yourself of that and don't beat yourself up too much because trauma's scary. And we never know how we're going to react to something. Survival of the
Absolutely.
fittest. But let me actually skip around to a different question since you brought that up. I think that this one is a really good follow up. Do you ever feel pressure to perform being okay when you're not? And how do you handle that internal conflict?
Yes, I mean, especially when you have like work obligations, when you get to a point where um, some eventually we all get to a point, especially in our job, especially in this job, where like content creation being the creative part almost is the same size as the work part, like sponsorships and obligations and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so sometimes there is no option for me. Like sometimes when a sponsor says, "Hey, you have to be on at this time and at this time and play this thing," like I have to do it if I want to continue building good relationships with those brands, and as well as like uh, just be seen as like a trustworthy creator that they could come back to in the future and be like, "Hey, remember that one girl that like did this when we were short on time? Like let's go back and give her another sponsorship." So there's a lot of things on the line when it comes to like these things, and whether it's raining or shining in my brain, like I have to do it if I want to like lay down the groundwork or the foundation for future opportunities. Um, so so yeah, I always like when those situations come about, which is very often, I do have to perform. I do have to act like everything's okay. especially, streamers always have like those days where like everything is just not working. Your camera's not working, your audio is messing up. You forgot to update your drivers. Like even in and it doesn't even have to be something as like I guess like strict as like having a sponsorship. It could also just be like you probably had really good, amazing things planned for that stream that day, and then everything's just falling apart. But you have to pretend that everything is okay because you want to set a good stream for your viewers that probably look forward to your stream that day. So I always feel like I have to perform in various different instances, whether it's a stream I planned or a sponsorship, or maybe it's even something even more private, like meeting other creators or meeting other, potential, whoever's like influencer, managers or something. I don't know. People that handle like sponsorships for brands and stuff. Like
PR people.
The PR people, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's always someone you probably have to perform for. So yeah,
that's a good point. And actually, now that you mentioned that, I definitely felt that way when we first met, because I was like, wow, like I'm just a girl, and I went into it like this can turn into so much more just because of the conversation that I was wanting to host with you and other plans that we have for the future, which we can't talk about just yet, but they're still very exciting. And I just thought, what if I say one thing that turns her off? What if that one thing just like screws up all of these plans and this opportunity? And you never know what that might be. But at the same time, it's like, hey, you know what? If I do say something that is off-putting, we can work through that later. Or maybe it's just not a good fit. And that's okay, too. But I can definitely understand coming from a business perspective and wanting to conserve connections with people that help you pay your bills. Because let's face it, that's what it is. And being a full-time creator, you have to rely on these connections that you have with brands and these sponsorships that you have to conserve those relationships and build that trust and continue to hold that trust with them. So I can only imagine how it must be to have that be a constant in your life, and you just wake up on the wrong side of the bed and you're just like, I still have to do that thing though. So let me put on my brave face and like Sparkly in chat said, masking. It's tough. It's so tough to just be like, well, I gotta do this. So I have to put everything aside that I've been feeling and thinking, because they don't care. Because they don't. They do care about you as a person, but when there's a deadline, they care about the deadline more than they care about the person. So
no, absolutely. That's actually something like super common that I've like learned to like social cues, I guess, in the professional space. It's like they're gonna obviously always be like the PR people are always gonna be like, oh no worries, like but that does not mean no worries, it's okay. It literally means like you should probably do it.
It's like, oh, it's okay, but it's really not.
It's really not okay. So those are the social cues I was, with regards to the trauma, I've always had to like, especially growing up in a Hispanic household, like you have to like read the room before you like really like, before you ask to go out, before you ask to like, I don't know. You always have to read the room. Depending on how much trauma your parents had, you have to read the room to see what you are allowed to ask. So then I learned those. So I don't know if that was like a good thing or a bad thing that I got from.
I honestly, I think it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse, because I feel like it teaches, and I'm sure there are other people of color who aren't of Latin descent in the audience right now who can relate. I feel like you just learn really good social cues. which is great. And I think that that translates really well to streaming, which is also great. But at the same time, you just turn into a person who is constantly saying, okay, well, hey, I'd really love to do this collab with you, but okay, if not, it's okay if not though.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I would really love to work with you, but if you don't want to, that's okay. And it's like, why do we do that to ourselves? Why don't we
Yeah.
just lead with that confidence of, hey,
Yes.
I really appreciate you as a person and I would love to engage with you in this way, whether it's a collab stream or just wanting to build a friendship, because you don't have to go into things thinking about collaborations. It can also just be, I really like you as a creator. I think we have a lot in common. I would love to be friends with you. And leave it
Yeah.
at that. Not the okay if not. You don't have to include
Yeah.
that in there. If the person
No,
says
yeah.
no, it's like, okay, well, I respect that and you move on. But yeah, I'm sorry for calling y'all out, but it's something that we do.
Something you needed to
and
hear.
yeah. It's something we
confident.
do, and just try to stray away from it, because I think that leading with that confidence will only get you those connections that you want. I feel like people get turned off by the, oh, but it's okay if you're not interested. Like, you don't have to do that. They will let you know if they're not.
Yeah.
But I wanted to move into more of a cultural question, since you mentioned being Latina. So you are Mexican American, and I wanted to know how that cultural identity for you has shaped the way that you show up online, and how has it influenced the community that you've built?
You know, with the Hispanic community, it's a little rough. I'm not going to lie, because it's two worlds, right? There is the Hispanic community from Latin America, which is a different world, and people don't seem to understand that. Like, Latinos from Latin America are it's a different world, and they do cross like with Latinos of the United States, or the English Mexican American, or Latinos here in the United States.
Yeah.
There is a cross. There's a Venn diagram somewhere there, but it's two separate worlds. Two like and it with the history and the trauma, the generational trauma, and like it's really hard to deal with, especially as a woman, because not only am I trying to, I'm trying to help pave that road in a space that doesn't really have many Hispanic content creators. We're like a smaller demographic in the whole, in compared to the bigger pie. But also there's a lot of working against my own community too, because we have a lot of flaws that we need to work against, which is colorism. If you guys look at all the most of the Spanish speaking content creators from Latin America, I'm not gonna lie to you, they're mostly all Eurocentric looking Latinos, and that's not. and that's but no, I'm talking like almost close, more often than not, blonde hair, blue eyes. We're talking like very Eurocentric looking Latinos.
It's
And I'm
crazy
just like,
how diverse we can be.
yeah, absolutely. And I'm just, there's colorism, there's machismo, there's a lot working against our own community, and also trying to pave the way with the rest of the community. So it can be very challenging, especially when I'm sharing my culture, when I'm like, hey, this is me making the food that I grew up making with my mom, because of these circumstances we were in. And of course, I have a lot of Latino men in my comments being like, "That's not how you do it. That's not how we did it. That's not how where I come from." And but it's like, but Mexico is huge. Like,
Yeah.
how they make tamales in Oaxaca is different than how they make tamales in, I don't know, Jalisco. Like, there's maybe a little difference, or a preference of meat or seasonings. But yeah, and I think people always like try to out Mexican each other or out Latino each other, and I'm
Yeah.
just like, I mean, I don't know what else you want me to do. I mean, the only thing that's left is me being literally born in Mexico. Like I don't know what else you want from me. Um, so yeah, it could be a little bit challenging, but I think it's really important to share my culture to be able to make those strides forward. Um, but it can be hard.
Yeah, and especially because there is a lot of intersectionality with not even just Latin communities, it's also the Caribbean, which is not
Hmm.
just Latin people. So there is a lot
Hmm.
of mixture in culture there that will find those similarities. And I think that it's totally okay to say that's really cool that you do that way, but I grew up doing it this way, and it
Hmm.
doesn't make anyone inherently wrong.
Yeah.
You just grew up with a different family, and that in itself is going to show up differently. There's still going to be
Hmm.
those common themes and things, and you might be able to relate on certain conversations that you might have had with your loved ones growing up, but that doesn't make you any less Mexican just because you make your tamales differently from someone whose family grew up an hour away from your family.
Yeah.
Like, you're still trying to embrace a part of you that is meaningful to you, and I think that that's what should be highlighted more. But I'm really hopeful that with programs like the guilds we're able to kind of destigmatize those conversations and make it more normalized to just celebrate one another and where we come from.
Hmm.
And I know that you mentioned machismo, and I wanted to touch on that just very quickly because I want to make sure that those who aren't sure what that might be in the chat understand. But I would love to get your perspective on what that means to you and what that might look like.
Oh wait, did I miss your question? I feel maybe I.
It's fine.
Wait, I'm sorry. I was like waiting for the question. I was like, wait, is that the question?
I feel like you just picked up your drink and you just like went into drink mode. I do that all the time. It is totally fine. I just wanted to get your perspective on what you interpret machismo to be and what it
Oh,
might
okay.
look like in your eyes from things that you've experienced.
Um, to me, machismo. To me, machismo is the viewing of women as lesser than, or when it's, I guess, me as a content creator, maybe I should just elaborate on my experience because by definition I can't really like definitionally tell, like really like elaborate, but as for my
Yeah.
experience, I think that's what I could speak on the best. um I think if it almost feels like when, as a Hispanic woman, you do things, it seems that it's kind of like hammered down. Like not too long ago, maybe probably like around graduation time last year, there was this whole trend of Hispanic women showing their like them graduating and what degrees they graduated in, and I thought it was very like uplifting and super amazing. Like especially uh, education hasn't been like at the center of Mexican of the Mexican community or Hispanic community here in the United States. I feel like there needs to be more of a focus on education. So seeing all these like lovely Latina women like graduate and with honors and like lawyers and doctors. And there was a lot of hate in the comments, kind of like hammering down like their accomplishments. And uh, when the TikTok community was talking about it, they're just like, why do men do that to Hispanic women? Like, why is that like our number one hater always seems to be Hispanic men,
Yeah.
watering down our accomplishments. And I'm not saying all men, of course, but this was just like a theme that was going on last year, and I think that's a perfect example of like how machismo can work. It's its negative effects on the community.
And I feel like that's a huge contributor to some of the conversations that we've had just about higher education and what it means for marginalized women especially, but just marginalized people overall. And I think that it should be more accessible to people. And I just wish that those who actually feel like they have more of a shot to get an in spaces like that, like the men who are criticizing the women who are working twice as hard to get there, would actually amplify that. So it wouldn't feel like it's a competition, and it's not a matter of equality, but rather equity, because there's a huge difference. But speaking about being within a male dominated space, this leads into another question I have perfectly. I feel like you've just segued into my questions just so well without knowing. So I have here, your audience is highly engaged, and you've shared with me that a high percentage of this audience consists of men. What's helped you stay grounded in the face of fast growth in a male dominated demographic?
Can you repeat that last part again?
Sure. What's helped you stay grounded in the face of fast growth in a male dominated demographic?
What do you mean by grounded?
So, grounded, like you don't let those kinds of comments sway you on who you are,
okay.
and you don't try to be complacent with them, because I feel like that's an easy route to take just to avoid that conflict, but that's just not who you are. So I would just love to know more about how you navigate that.
So I think to a degree, being a content creator, whether you would like to or not, you are to a degree inclined to your community, especially if you want to scale that eventually to something you want to see. I I do try to lean into the harmless, or maybe like more like meme parts of like the persona that I am, because honestly I blew up in a way that was very controversial, whether it was a politics part or the being over sexualized part. So there was like a way, there was a way that I navigated it to where like I separated myself as much as I could in a healthy way from politics, but also be able to dive into it when I would like. But in regards to the over sexualized part, that's the big one that's kind of hard to shake off. I think for a lot of women, or women in general, even when you're not being sexual at all or sexy at all, someone manages to sexualize you in a way. So I at least I try to kind of like call out when I feel like someone, or there is a trend of people trying to do that to me, like not just sexualize me, but almost to like degrade me. So I try to like set a boundary where I'm like, okay, I understand a lot of you guys are here because you guys think I'm attractive. Okay. That's just the reality of the matter. But like, there's no reason for you to disrespect me, you know? So there is those boundaries that I do set, because it's one thing that if you sexualize me on your own time, in your own whatever, wherever the heck you are,
Your own personal bubble.
in your own personal bubble. But if you're in my stream, when you're in my stream and you're talking to my stream, like, you're not going to talk to me in that way you were talking to me. You're going to talk to me with respect. You're going to be normal, and you're going to talk with the rest of the community, or you could get out. So yeah, and of course I always set my boundaries as well, like like with comments and stuff like that people don't feel like it's a free for all, that they could just like talk to me or put whatever comments in my stuff. So I try to protect myself as much as I can. But I'm going to be honest, I'm very self-aware of like the reality of the matter of like my situation and my persona, and I've even leaned into it. But it's kind of just like, it's kind of just how it's kind of just how you want to play the game, and it's kind of like that's pretty much kind of how I go about it. Like, how do I want to play this game? Lean into it, reel back, lean into it, reel back, and then eventually, hopefully, from that, you actually get your community to whatever you want it to develop into. And it takes a while, but it's always worth a shot if you want to. Um, if you don't like where your community stands, you could always try to shift it in different ways.
Yeah, I love that response because it just demonstrates how not every interaction and situation that you might come across with people that are being interesting in your stream is gonna turn out the same way. You're gonna handle it as you see fit in the moment and based on how you're feeling. And this really goes back to what we were talking about earlier with trauma and how you just handle things the best way that you can in that moment. And you might go back and say, I could have handled this a little bit differently, but you acted on how you were feeling, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of go into this conversation a little bit more. And I love how I wrote this, and it's perfect to how you just responded. You're known for your sense of humor and your softness, but also not for taking anyone's shit. So how do you handle those kind of parasocial dynamics or the emotional expectations that your community might have of you? Like, if you have a story that sticks out in your mind, maybe that would be a great way to approach it.
I I feel like I'm a person of a lot of polar opposites. Like I feel like the way I was portrayed online initially was very like people would come into my stream and they would be like, "Oh, I thought your voice would be higher," or like XYZ. Like they had this perception of me that they saw online that when they came into my stream and they heard me have a fairly normal voice or probably even say some raunchy or things that you probably wouldn't expect to come out of my mouth. Like then they were like taken aback, and I think I do enjoy doing those things where like I portray like this soft girliness, but also when you actually come into my stream you actually see my content. Like there is a sort of like maybe edginess to it, or maybe like an unexpected turn that you didn't expect, and I try to keep that. I try to just show my most authentic self because that is my authentic self. I do like the girly stuff, but like I I'm not I grew up in a very tough situation, and that didn't really make for a very delicate personality. And um and um and I like to let people know that I will not take your shit. I really enjoy my peace. I really enjoy my peace, and you could think I'm soft and girly, and if that's the idea you want to have in your mind, that's great. But like if you do cross a line, I will set you in your place, and I'm not gonna let you just do whatever or think whatever. Or sometimes people like there's people that probably not in a they don't try to like come in and say rude shit, but like some people come in and think that they could just talk to me like, oh, like, hi babe or something like in the chat, and I'm like, get out. who are you? And usually they just get banned or they get a warning, but yeah, it's like entitlement or entitlement is unfortunately very common. So I try to always break those parasocial like indicators when I see them.
It just makes me think of I feel like if I could depict who you are as a person into a very simple concept, you're like a porcupine with a pink bow on. So
yes.
Porcupines, when they're not feeling threatened, have their spikes down, and you can pet them and they're soft and cuddly and cute and everything, but when they feel intimidated, the spikes come out. but you still have the pink bow on. So it's like, remember, that's still me, but also don't fuck with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, literally, I feel like that's, like, if you were an animal, that would be who you represent. And I think that that's something that comes with conditioning of how you may have grown up, and then also being in the public eye as you are. You just have to protect yourself in that way, just to remind people that, hey, there's a whole person behind the screen. Like, you may see me on your phone or on your computer and think that I'm just here to be your puppet and give you entertainment, but I have feelings, I have a heart, I have a mind of my own, and I'm gonna speak it. So yeah, totally. That's just something that I randomly thought of. New goal unlocked: be a porcupine. Think about it. It's a really good analogy. It's okay to show your softness to people who make you feel safe in it and comfortable being a little bit vulnerable and being open and being more of yourself. But it's also okay to take that back a little bit if you're not feeling as safe anymore, because any animal in any kind of self-defense moment takes their claws out because they have to take care of themselves. So we deserve to do the same. Trying to skip around here just to make the conversation flow. This is a good one. So just to touch on the idea of protecting yourself a little bit more, how do you decide what to share publicly and what to keep private, especially when people feel entitled to access every part of you?
Actually, I've done a really good job of not sharing any of my private life, really. There's a lot of reasons I do that, and I think mostly is because a lot of the people in my life really do prefer to be private people, and I just feel like at the end of the day, like I'm the only one that I would like to be in the crossfire if for some reason the internet decides to attack me that day or for whatever reason. So I don't like sharing anything about my private life, and I think I've done a really good job. Like, I think also because my audience is mostly men, when you like ask maybe your partner or boyfriend, like you're like, oh, like I heard this gossip, but your boyfriend just never has like the full context of the gossip, and you're asking him all these questions. Yeah. And they never they're like, oh yeah, so and so broke up, and you're like, why? Oh, I don't know. We didn't get that far. So I think that's also like a plus of having mostly men as like your audience, is that they don't really ask too many questions either.
Yeah.
They're to a degree pretty simple people.
I appreciate that perspective. I didn't think about it that way.
I'll give them credit where credit is due. They're just like, for the most part, they're just like, I'm here to see the eye candy and her do cute things. I do not care about her family. I do not care about anything else. Just girl on screen. And I'm like, that's fine. Just, I don't like too many questions being asked anyways.
That is a good point. And I feel like just thinking about the connections that I've made with streamers who are guys as well, and just being in their chat and hanging out with the community, especially if we have mutuals, they're literally just there to watch the gameplay and meme the whole time. They're not asking about each other's children and family and friends and things. Like, maybe they'll ask about their jobs. Like, I feel like that's the closest you'll get to those more like personal conversations if they know where each of them works and how that's going. Also, just there to spam commands. That's my partner right there. So perfect example of
it's like,
how
yeah, man.
Yeah, it's like you're just there to have a good time. You're not there to like talk about the pillow talk. You know, it's just not the space
Yeah.
for that. So that is a good point, and I can definitely appreciate that, and hopefully it becomes more of a normalized thing on social media too, because I feel like that's where people might feel a little bit bolder to
Yeah.
actually try and get in other people's business.
It's like, oh, hey man, yeah, I broke up with my girlfriend, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm sorry about that, man. Anyways, let's queue up. And it's like, okay. It's like that's as far as it gets, I think. So
Like, yeah, like, oh, sorry, man. Anyway, where are we dropping? Like,
yeah,
okay,
exactly.
okay.
Exactly.
I love that. Um, so I think we're getting close on time here. So I'm trying to see where I want to lead this conversation before we start to wrap up. Um, oh, I definitely want to talk about this, especially because we briefly touched on how our elders might have more societal norms of what success might look like. And you had talked briefly about how education might not be on the forefront. But I also feel like it's common to experience being a content creator not being a real job. So I would love to have that conversation with you. And the question I have here is, what are some ways you've redefined success for yourself outside of validation through the algorithm? So that's part one of the question. And then I'll repeat the second part in case we go on a tangent. But especially when elders within our culture don't see the work we do as a real job.
Um, I'm gonna be honest with you. This is like a very horrible, terrible thing. I probably the worst person to talk about this because, listen, my parents are severe alcoholics. Whoa, no, workaholics. They're not alcoholics.
Thank you for clarifying. Either way, no judgment. But
They're severe, severe workaholics. That ever since I was a kid, because my parents they immigrated to this country and like it was like I said, they lived in a fight or flight mode, and that unfortunately leaked onto my life. Um, and they put work above everything. They put work above, honestly, they put work above me. They put it above, like they would leave me with random babysitters, and that like was kind of traumatic because some of them were not great. They would, as soon as they were able to leave me by myself at home, they did. I was like 12 by myself at home. As soon as I was able to take care of my younger sibling, they would allow me to do that. And they put work about, and my parents never came to a single sport award ceremony. They never came to any of those things because they chose work over me every time. I think they only came to my graduation for middle school and high school, and that's it. Um, so that it's really hard because my parents are really amazing people, but like they had a lot of faults in regards to parenting because I feel like they made me a really great human being morally. But as far as like their parenting, I think that was a little where they had their flaws. Um, so yeah, I feel like I'm the worst person to speak about this because I think that transferred into my life where I feel like my work is everything to me. Which is why I had such a really hard time uh, really finding that break because I felt like if I wasn't working, then if you aren't working, then what are you doing? Um, and that's kind of like my dad, even till this day, he wakes up at 5 in the morning. He works till 8, and he genuinely doesn't have to. And he's like in his 50s, and he's like, my dad, even now, he's like, if I'm not working, then like I feel very frustrated. And I'm like, Dad, I think you need to just go to a therapist, maybe. Like, I don't think it's.
Yeah,
Like, but
maybe.
yeah, I think, but yeah, it's like, I think maybe it's because, when you're doing that for 30 years straight, like, I can't understand why breaking that habit, breaking that cycle of like not working is like breaking that cycle of working to not work. And if something feels missing, when you've been doing that as a survival, as survival for so long, and then now not having to do it feels wrong. Um, uh, so yeah, I finding validation and like success outside of my job has been very hard for me. The only thing that I could really think of right now is probably like just the money that I have saved up, and also pursuing education. Also, that's something that's very validating to me. I'm not in a traditional schooling situation right now. I applied for college. I applied for an Ivy League, and shocker, I didn't get in. But like, um, and yeah, I but I still have been seeking education wherever I can. So I've been
Yeah.
studying Japanese for about a year now.
Ooh,
So those are little wins that I like to find validation in. Like, I'm learning my fourth language, kind of.
look at you.
Um, so so yeah, English, Spanish. I took 3 years of French. I would like to go back into learning more French, but right now I'm learning Japanese. So yeah, those are the small areas where I'm finding validation, like outside of my work. But yeah, like, unfortunately at the moment, I'm working on it still. That's a work in progress, to not find my entire identity in my job, because it's something that just kind of was conditioned into me. Like, if you're not working, then what are you doing? And I don't think that's a really healthy, as motivational, and like this false validation that it presents to you. Like, if you're not working, then what are you doing? Like, grind, grind, grind. As motivational as that sounds, it really realistically is not healthy for you, and
Yeah.
it won't fill any holes you have, actually. Like it's there's people that don't have any money, that are not fulfilled. There's people that I know that have a lot of money and are not fulfilled either. So like, you're not going to find any validation in only in your work. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I think that you found a way to not only undo some of those.
My camera
I
froze, but I can hear you.
Oh yeah, I was wondering. I was like, did I freeze too? um, but I I feel like you've done a really good job at finding ways to undo some of those ideas that your family presented to you as being how you proceed with your life. So in terms of education, you had talked about how your family wasn't really present as you were growing as a student, and that was a part of your childhood that you really didn't get to bond with as much. But you've decided, fuck it, I'm gonna go back to school and I'm gonna see what I do with my life. I'm gonna see what that's gonna look like and see what I can do with my future. And I think that's a great way to still feel that sense of productivity, but also approach things in a way of, I'm doing this for myself and to grow as a person. And then on top of that, linguistics is a great way to use your brain muscles, but also do something really cool. So I love languages. I think they're fascinating. I try and understand things in foreign languages that I don't actually know when I'm like watching Netflix or something like that. And it's just a really fun hobby for me. So I think that you're just broadening who you are as a person in the process and exploring more of the world in such a simple way that I think is really cool. So keep doing it.
Thanks, Natalie. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I wanted to share that just because I don't want people to think that, like, it's really easy to come up here and it be presented with such which such esteem from you. I really appreciate that, and it could be easy to just go off of that and like portray myself as like this perfect person with this perfect background. And I'm pretty sure there's people like that. I am just not that person. And since we were talking about mental health, it's very important. I think what contributes to mental health is also what you take in, being on social media and people always presenting the best side of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
On the inside there's probably the total opposite going on, is also, I think, not very genuine, and to some degree you're not really, I wouldn't say you're hurting, but you're definitely not adding to like the already brain rot that you get from
Yeah.
absorbing social media. So I didn't want to come up here and be like, oh, I'm great and everything's fine, and I've been going to a therapist for like a year now. It's like, no, I've struggled getting a therapist. It's really hard to find one. And my family isn't perfect, and I'm not perfect either. So yeah, and we're all working through things, as we're all here on this planet trying to find our way and find ourselves, and do what makes us happy.
Yeah. And I love that you still shared that, because, I think it's important to celebrate your wins in mental health too. Obviously, amplifying the fact that we have our struggles and we have things that we're working on. It humanizes us, and it normalizes the idea of others feeling vulnerable enough to share that as well. But I think it's also important to say, hey, I'm doing everything I can to work on myself. I am going to therapy. I'm speaking to someone about the things that I've dealt with as a person, and we're so multifaceted. So this actually goes back to what you mentioned when you first introduced yourself, and you said that you have ADHD, but you try not to let that define you. It's just part of who you are, and it affects how you interact with the world. But that doesn't mean that it is all of who you are and that you should just be seen as that. So I think that having someone professional to talk to about those things is a great way to unlearn that and undo those stigmas of allowing your mental health to completely define who you are as a person. You're way more than that, and there's so many layers to us that are so exciting and so inspiring to learn about. And I wanted to share a little bit of a personal tidbit myself. I am trying to go back to school as well, particularly for positive psychology. And that's a huge reason why I did the summit this week, so I could start to figure out what that might look like and how I can approach that in a way that helps other people, but also helps me in my healing journey, because I am neurospicy too. So I think that it's a great way to help myself grow, but also teach others along the way ways to find who they are despite having these ailments to them, and these traumas that they have to deal with. So yeah, I think that this is a great note to end on in terms of the interview itself. But I do have one final question for you. So if someone in the audience is feeling unseen, what's something you'd want to leave them with? And what would you want to hear in that kind of moment?
Oh, brother. Um, I think, I think, I've gone, as I mentioned before, I've gone through a lot of things, and I've, from childhood to, a lot of trauma that I went through as a teenager, and even like moving out of my parents' house and like starting those steps of like personal growth. There was a lot of time that I spent alone. And it was very, very, there was at times where I felt like I wasn't seen, like when you are in a house with your family, but like I said, like your family is always working and your brother's in school, it's like you do feel like very unseen. You're kind of in a house of people, but it doesn't feel like anyone's there at the same time. And that could apply to any circumstance, really. But I think there is a big step that I personally took, is that the biggest thing, or I want to say one of the healthiest things you could do for yourself is learn how to be content alone. Because when you learn how to be content alone, you can only add on when you're with others rather than filling in what you are missing with other people. You are adding on. So once you learn to be happy and content by yourself, then you are going to feel unstoppable because you won't need anything. You can only add on to your life. You don't have to fill anything. So and that's how I found a lot of self-respect. That's how I found a lot of I things felt more joyful to me because I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't filling a hole. I was just adding on to my life. And it, although you although you feel like, oh, I'm unseen, and I feel like I feel invisible, it's like you need to see yourself first. When you see yourself, you're not going to need anyone else to see you because you see yourself, you're confident in yourself, and self-respect alone will take you and protect you from a lot of things.
I couldn't agree more.
So yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things, and that was the start. Me seeing myself and learning that self-respect and feeling validated in myself was literally the beginning of a huge self-improvement journey that I've come a really long way from. So that was the biggest thing for me, genuinely. So
I love that, and I feel like that was actually a huge part of my personal healing journey as well. Just learning to enjoy my own company. And that's really fucking scary. It's so scary because it's like, oh my God, I'm alone in my thoughts and in my brain, and only I have control of where that goes. But that's also a beautiful thing because I feel like you learn so much more about yourself in those moments. And obviously sharing moments with other people and even having conversations like this one will give you a lot of perspective on who you are, and you will have the pleasure of learning more about the other person that you're chatting with. But there's nothing like taking a moment to reflect on how much you've grown even over the past week, and just seeing how much your life has changed in just a week. So if there's one key takeaway that I'd like to leave you all with tonight, it's that. Just think about everything that you've achieved and accomplished over the past week, 2 weeks, month, and see how much you've grown, and pat yourself on the back for it because you deserve to.
The beach is made of tiny little microscopic grains of sand, and just keep adding on to your beach, even it's little wins, little grains. So
I love that.
Little grains make a whole beach. So
that's a very, very good point. And as a mermaid, I'm a fan. Thank you.
I did that
so
analogy
much.
Specifically for that reason.
I love that. And that's something that I've picked up with you, that you do a really good job at bringing analogies that make you see the world in a different light from something as simple as just sand on a beach, which I love that. That's going to be a huge takeaway for me personally tonight, and I'm sure for others as well. So
I think it's a Hispanic thing.
It's true. It's true. We're always trying to find like phrases to associate things with, and they might not make sense in a literal sense, but figuratively we know what we're trying to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, Neeko. I had a lovely time chatting with you. I feel like I learned so much about you, and I even learned some things about myself in the process. And I hope that everyone who tuned in tonight feels the same way. And I'm really glad to be able to host these conversations for you all and give you things to reflect on during Mental Health Awareness Month. But yeah,
Thank you so much for having me.
that's gonna be it. Thanks for joining us, and maybe we'll have more chats like this in the future. So
Yeah, I'd
keep
love
an
to.
eye out, y'all. But yeah, thank you everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us, and I'll catch you tomorrow for our next segment. So check out the events in the server. I have everything else scheduled out there. So if you would like to tune in, you'll see when we'll be live next, and I'll see you then. Yeah, bye everyone. Thank you.